Didn't intend to kill him, just intended to hurt him. So that's what you're going to see. You're going to see someone who's hitting someone or hurting someone. There's one example on the bar exam where someone puts poison in somebody's food because they want to make them sick. And they didn't intend to kill them, but they wanted them to become ill. In that particular instance, the poison actually made that person so ill that they died from it. That's another example of intent to commit serious bodily injury. All right, so I think you've got that. Let's move on now to the next type of murder, and that is depraved heart murder. And again, it's depraved heart murder, and it's a general intent crime, and I'm going to go over the definition with you. The definition of depraved heart murder is an unintentional killing that results from conduct that is caused by wanton and reckless disregard for human life. Once again, the definition of a depraved heart murder, and it's a general intent crime. The definition is it's an unintentional killing resulting from conduct that is caused by wanton and reckless disregard for life. Let me give you an example. It's where, for example, the defendant shoots at a passenger train and he kills a victim on the train. That is an example of a depraved heart murder. He didn't intend to kill anybody. He didn't intend to hurt anybody. He's just shooting at a train, goofing off, not even realizing that there might be a passenger on it. But what he's done is the action is really reckless disregard for the fact that there might be somebody on that train. Another one is where you would see someone speeding on a crowded street or in a city. If someone is speeding at excessive speed in a crowded city, we can find them guilty of murder for the excessive speed and their wanton, reckless disregard for the pedestrians who are within that city. I want you to know that, okay? So those are the 4 types of murder. Once again, intent to kill, murder, felony murder, intent to commit serious bodily injury, and depraved heart murder. Those are your 4 types of murder. We're going to move forward now and we're going to go over manslaughter. And there are 2 types of manslaughter. There is voluntary manslaughter and involuntary manslaughter. Once again, voluntary manslaughter and involuntary manslaughter, 2 different types. Let's talk first about voluntary manslaughter. Basically, voluntary manslaughter is the heat of passion killings, and we talked about that earlier as a mitigation. Again, voluntary manslaughter is heat of passion killings. Let me give you the definition for voluntary manslaughter. It is an intentional killing done in the heat of passion and where the defendant lost control with no time to cool off. Once again, an intentional killing done in the heat of passion where the defendant lost control and had no time to cool off. So let's go over the elements. Remember, it has to be, number 1, an intentional killing. Number 2, you have to have the heat of passion. So look for a provocation. A reasonable person, the provocation is done by a reasonable person standard. And make sure that he did not have time to cool off. And I want you to remember, the defendant must have lost all control. So those are your 3 elements. Number 1 is intent to kill. Number 2 is it happened in the heat of passion. There was a provocation. There was no time to cool off. And number 3, the defendant lost all mental control of what he was doing, had no idea what he was doing, just flipped out, okay? So that is an example of that. Let's talk about an example. An example would be where a spouse finds his wife in bed with another man. I gave you an example earlier under murder where he found him in bed, he goes to the garage, sits and thinks about for a moment, gets a gun, and decides he's going to kill him. In a voluntary manslaughter situation, what happens is he walks in, sees his wife in bed, flips out, runs to the side of the bedroom in the drawer, pulls out a gun, and shoots him instantly. That is a heat of passion. It happens instantly, quickly, no time to think, no time to cool off. It just happens very, very quickly. So that's what you're going to see for the for voluntary manslaughter. Now let's talk about involuntary manslaughter. Let's go over a definition for involuntary manslaughter. It's an unintentional killing without malice caused by the defendant's negligent conduct. Once again, it's an unintentional killing without malice caused by the negligent conduct of the defendant. Negligent conduct that is more egregious than the ordinary tort type of actions. So let me give you an example. It's where someone's driving down the street and they're talking on their cell phone, and they're driving at a safe speed, but they aren't paying attention, and he drives through a red light maybe and kills a pedestrian in the sidewalk. That is negligent conduct. It is egregious enough to where we're going to hold that person liable for involuntary manslaughter, okay? So I want to go over some differences between depraved heart murder and involuntary manslaughter, because remember, they are both unintentional killings, but one is murder and the other one is involuntary manslaughter. So focus on the degrees of conduct. That's very important. That is what is the determining factor on whether it's going to be depraved heart murder or an involuntary manslaughter. And when you're on exam and you're writing it, you have to write on all of them. You have to go down the line and write on, murder. Is it murder? If it's not, you have to dismiss it. And then you would discuss the depraved heart murder, and then you would go all the way down to an involuntary manslaughter. You want to look for reckless conduct, gross conscious disregard for the safety of others. That is depraved heart murder. Whereas involuntary manslaughter is just criminal negligence. It's more than ordinary tort negligence. Let me give you some examples of the difference between depraved heart murder and involuntary manslaughter. Okay, so an example of depraved heart murder, it's where someone shoots a gun into a house where there's a party going on. Didn't intend to kill anybody, but it's really, really very reckless conduct. And let's look at involuntary manslaughter. That is where someone shoots a gun into an abandoned building, but someone is inside that building unbeknownst to them. That would be involuntary manslaughter. Okay, another example, just to give you one more, is, let's see, speeding in a desert and someone pulls out into the street and someone is killed. That's involuntary manslaughter. It's a deserted street, there's nobody out there, but the excessive speed negligent excessive speed caused an accident. That is involuntary manslaughter, as opposed to the example I gave you earlier where someone is speeding in a crowded city and going excessive speed. That is a complete disregard for the safety of others who are actually in the city. That is a good example of depraved heart murder. And that pretty much sums it up for the murder or homicide. Again, we went over the homicide, which is the killing of a human by a human. We have 4 types of murder: intent to kill, felony murder rule. Number 3 would be intent to commit serious bodily injury. Number 4 is depraved heart murder. And then we have 2 types of manslaughter. There is voluntary manslaughter, which is heat of passion killings, and we have involuntary manslaughter, which is an unintentional killing that is caused by the negligent conduct of the defendant. And that is all of your information that you need to know for murder.